thank you. Let me first apologize because I'm not going to announce my candidacy for the Democratic presidency. I do not fit the qualifications needed for that job yet. Okay, so I've heard that it's good color and good form, to begin a speech with some local color. So let's begin with a connection. 15 years ago, I sat right where you are, about to graduate from RMHS. Before you become my RMHS graduate comrades, let me first offer you one piece of sentimental advice. Time goes by really fast. You will sit there one day and say to yourself, whoa, where'd the time go? You've heard it before, I'm sure, but I can't help but to encourage you to enjoy the moments you have, because soon they'll be memories. My sophomore year was defined by 9/11. It feels like forever ago. Your sophomore year was defined by the Cubs winning the World Series. Yeah, okay, good. And then after that, many of you were conspicuously absent on the day of the World Series parade, and soon that will feel like forever ago. With that said, enjoy the moments that you have, but also realize that there is limited time to get things done, so don't hesitate. Okay, so now enough of the cliche sentimentality, because that's not my brand. Let's get down to business. I want to preface my words with something to think about, a common American myth, if you will, that many of you are probably relating to at this very moment. The idea that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Raise your hand if you feel that way right now. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Graduates, how many of you feel like you found the light? Ah, there you go. You can participate, it's okay. Upon receiving the news, I'll come back to that in a second. Upon receiving the news that I would deliver this very speech, my mind couldn't help but wonder, why would they democratically elect me? While thinking of the possibilities, I narrowed it down to two. Either they figured they'd pull one final senior prank by selecting a teacher that stutters, or they were intrigued by ideas I shared. It's okay to laugh at that. I shared with them over the course of their high school careers. I regret to inform most of the people in attendance, it was probably the latter. The great irony is, I must be one of the least sentimental teachers preferring to dive into political discussions rather than ask someone how their weekend was. So it goes. This group of students must like that. They consciously chose for their last lecture of high school a ruthless criticism of everything imaginable. I want to spend the limited time I have left now that I've done the history teacher thing and contextualized, which I just did, on 3 points, each introduced with a quote. So first, I'd like to address the conditions under which you graduates toiled during your high school career. According to an influential post-Enlightenment philosopher, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. This quote illustrates for us an important truth we must confront. You students entered high school, a high school system in which you have little control over the conditions. While in high school, you were subject to learning conditions and educational philosophies that not only took your voice into consideration too little, but also created other possibilities of alienation. Among these were a system that terrorized you with standardized tests and alienated you from the true purpose of education, to explore the world and develop your interests and your ideal self. A system that in many cases bombarded you with homework, so much so that you had to make conscious decisions between school and leisure time. A system that emphasized your future at the expense of the present. We've convinced you that success is based largely on potential income and financial security, rather than developing an inner moral compass, carving out an understanding of the world for yourself. This line of thought has encouraged you to fetishize commodities and ignore the egalitarian meaning of life. A system that emphasized the future occupation as the key to happiness, while not discussing worker rights or ways to avoid being exploited. A system that vilified you as a generation for your obsession with technology, while giving you iPads at the same time, all the while your elders planned their next Zoom call. We kowtowed to the status quo and too infrequently asked you to think outside of the box. For instance, in many discussions we have talked to you about discrimination, but have failed to mention or note that arguably the most common form of discrimination in our society is ageism. And now I hear chants of certain people being too old to complete certain tasks or hold certain positions. These are but a few of the conditions in place during the 4 years, conditions that surely contributed to frustration at some point. They were decided before you entered, but still dictated your trajectory. This said, you have persevered, and here you find yourself, despite the obstacles, despite the challenges, victorious. Next, let's address the world into which you will enter after high school. An influential thinker discussing human Nature, I always struggle with that one, once noted, a bee puts to shame many an architect in the construction of her cells. What distinguishes the worst architect from the bee is this, that the architect raises his structure in imagination before he erects it in reality. The society into which you will enter was first imagined, then implemented by our predecessors. It was contrived, then put into place. It has been said that the tradition of all dead generations weighed like a nightmare on the brains of the living. So let's talk about that society. This is a society in which conscious decisions have made college so expensive that too many of you agonize over paying for it. You have to capitulate your dreams for something that will make you quick money so you can get to paying off those loans. A society that is recalcitrant when it comes to providing the right to adequate health care to humans, not based on how much money they have, but the fact that they are human in the beginning. A society that thinks taxes are bad. We have spent more time teaching you about future individual success while failing to remind you that you belong to a society that will support you the rest of your life. A world that is in crisis, according to some scientists whose claim the serious environmental consequences are right around the corner. A society that remains wedded to a system that expects future economic crises, despite the fact that some people, perhaps even you, might be graduating college when it is expected to hit. A society that refuses to acknowledge that accomplishments are made not individually, but rather through collaboration and cooperation between humans. Look around. Go ahead, look around. Make eye contact with somebody that has helped you through this experience. I doubt any of you cannot attribute at least part of your success to another human being in the room. We claim that we stand on our own 2 feet, ignoring the help that we've received from others. In the midst of graduation ceremonies that celebrate individual achievements, we must remember that these achievements are the product of social relations. The human being is not like the bee. Humans think about what they do. We have thought and planned this all up, which means if we have created this situation, we can do something about it. Lastly, what is there to do? A final quote from a famous philosopher noted, "Philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it." It is certainly easier said than done, but what is there to be done? Obviously, you will not change society on your own. It will be done through collective action. So from this day forward, I encourage you to read a book written by a college professor instead of watching a YouTube video. Learning is invaluable, and no matter what realm of intellectual life you devote yourself to, try to be just that, about intellectual. Question everything. If someone tried to convince you something using disaggregated statistics, you should take a second and research it to confirm whether or not you are being sold snake oil. Don't reduce your understandings of important topics to this or that. Add nuance to all situations and be ready to recognize that the simplest explanation is probably not sufficient. Admit your privilege. Chances are, if you are in a precarious situation, someone else in the world is too. Avoid taking your anger with your current situation out on those below you in the social hierarchy and divert your attention in another direction. You must take note of and face systematic oppression and its disastrous results. Remember these influential words from Howard Zinn. You cannot be neutral on a moving train. Not taking a side is cowardly, and when you fail to stand up against injustice, the oppressor will win every time. A better future is going to require you to be forceful with your intent and will require you to develop a level of consciousness, which I hope I have inspired some of you to do today. Now, if any of you during this discussion have been made to think or have put a head nod in at least a little bit, you have been influenced by quotes from a post-Enlightenment philosopher named Karl Marx. If you are horrified, don't be. These are interesting times we live in, evidenced by the fact that these graduates are entering adulthood having lived their lives in the context of 2 unpopular wars and a catastrophic economic collapse. Interesting times call for interesting and invigorating ideas. Perhaps it's time we forget austerity measures and give posterity what most of these graduates want. A more enjoyable and rewarding life, not defined by inequality and reckless hegemony, but by compassion, egalitarianism, and a new kind of enlightenment. We can improve our conditions. We can not only imagine a better future, we can construct one. You graduates have an agency, but you need to deploy it. It will take work, and it is up to you. We are all depending on you. You know that light at the end of the tunnel that we have been encouraging you with and we thought about at the beginning of the speech? Well, my greatest fear is that that so-called light at the end of the tunnel is in fact an oncoming train. We need you to make sure that that train is stopped. Graduates of 2019, unite, for you have nothing to lose but your chains. Thank you.